What's up, Cybonics? Welcome to a new quick win, and today we're getting into a very interesting pattern. Not a huge functionality, but a small improvement that can really spice up your Ionic application. We will build a cool directive that on scroll allows you to scroll out or fade out at the same time your header status bar or the toolbar. And also we will do a second effect for that matter that can bring in the toolbar. It's like a bit like the Airbnb effect that I've seen in the past. So a really interesting thing. So let's do this. First of all, I started with a blank new application so you can easily follow along. And then I generated a new module that we will use for our directives. So that makes it kind of easy to import them in other pages, and then simply go ahead and generate two new directives. As an Ionic Academy member, you can check out the full source code linked below the video. Otherwise, you can just follow along in here. So let's get started. First of all, I will also bring in my view because I will show you everything on a real device. I think that looks a bit better. So let's put this to the side and let's take a bit of this. First of all, we got our shared directives module. If you generate the module first and then the directives afterwards, they are already declared, but we also need to export them. So put in another block exports and then export both directives. Then we can already close this and move on to the module file of the page where you want to use the directive. So let's say we want to use it in home. We're gonna simply add the shared directives module in here, and that's already everything that we need. Now let's start with the scroll out. I think that's the most popular one. Actually, we don't need the homepage HTML, but we need not the TS, but the HTML. So what I did so far, I just added a few buttons to the left and to the end inside the toolbar just to, well, I saw this in the Airbnb application. So we need a way to change the toolbar, and we need a way to listen to the Ion content scroll events. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna put in our app hide header in here. And now you might ask where this is coming from. Well, that's automatically the name of your generated directive. So if you call it hide header, Angular will add this selector in front of it to make it kind of unique. And well, that looks interesting. I think I didn't do this. Was this automatically generated? Interesting. Anyway, within our header directive, we need an input first of all. So go ahead with input, and we will use a little trick in here. So we will give this input the same name like the actual directive, and internally we will access it as toolbar. And by doing this, we can go to our home page and simply use the directive like this. So otherwise you would have to add the directive name in here, app hide header, and then perhaps use a toolbar in here and then set this to the toolbar. But by giving this property or this input the same name, we can actually use it with this like a short syntax. And we'll just define on the toolbar a reference toolbar and pass this in. So now the directive has a reference to our toolbar, and we also need to make sure that our Ion content outputs all the scroll events because we're listening to scroll events. So we will go ahead with scroll events true. Actually, we don't need those brackets. So that's already a good start for our header directive. We also need the toolbar height. I will set this in the beginning within our hide header directive. Actually, let's close everything so you're not confused. Toolbar height 244, that's the height on iOS, but we will use this also in a different way so we can also calculate the height. It was actually a bit more challenging because it wasn't initially available. But we will get there. So we need the renderer to access our DOM rendering, and we will also inject the DOM controller from Ionic Angular. With this DOM controller, we can more efficiently write or read from the DOM and that will be used within our ng on init directly. So as I said, this is really not a great idea because on iOS and Android the value will be different, but we can easily use now the DOM controller read and put in some brackets and then set our toolbar height to this.toolbar.clientHeight. I tried to use this inside ng after view init or just ng on init. It wasn't working anywhere, so it really just works like when the directive has loaded, when all the component is finished, and using the DOM controller read will make the read operation and everything in here like in the next tick. So that is a good idea. Right now the toolbar is actually not completely correct. We have the input and the reference to the toolbar, but we also need to use from the input the actual element. Maybe I could show you how it's looking otherwise, so you don't get confused. Can we get like a localhost preview for this? Yes, great. So right now you see test Ion toolbar, and here is the actual Ion toolbar element. So that's why we set our toolbar to this.toolbar element. Just a quick fix. Now we got the height, that's great, and now the actual challenging part begins. So the directive was added to the Ion content. The Ion content outputs the Ion scroll events, and we can listen to them using the annotation host listener. And we want to listen to the Ion scroll events, and there will actually be some information in here. We will access this as event, or that's actually the name. And we can call this on content scroll. That's what you usually see in other tutorials as well. All right, we got our function. We can log the event out and test if we're actually listening to scroll events. I think, yeah, you see I kind of scroll with my wheel. It already works. We don't have any content in here. Let's quickly change this. For this testing case, I added an image to my assets folder, so a great image. And then you can just go ahead within your home page and put in the image, because I wanted to have an image and a cards, just whatever. I really just needed anything so I can scroll this page. Now we can see we get all the events, we can scroll, and we want to make the header disappear while we scroll down, and we want to make it come back once we scroll back up. And in other tutorials I also saw that they use like an animation, so at a specific point they completely remove the toolbar, but I felt like, well, so at a specific position this animation takes place, and it doesn't really feel natural. Usually in applications I see this like more of a natural scrolling. You scroll and it also scrolls, so it's not happening immediately. And therefore we will do this a bit differently. First of all, we want to access the scroll top from event detail scroll top. That's like the distance we've scrolled from the top so far. I should have just left this open for testing. So now we should see we go down and the number increases, and once we go back, the number decreases back to 0. Okay, with that information, we already got enough for our actual animation. So what we want to do is we want to change the position of the header. So let's say new position equals scroll top divided by 5. So that just makes the whole scrolling a bit more smooth. If you take just the raw value, it's, I think, a bit too fast. You might even use like 8 or 10 to make it even slower. And then we will also make this a negative number, because of course the position should be something like -5, -10, and finally -44. So if our new position is lower than our actual toolbar height, for this case just imagine it's 44. if the new position is like -45, that doesn't really make sense. We just need to get to -44 to completely hide our toolbar. And therefore, if we go lower than that value, we will just set the new position to minus this dot toolbar height. I hope that's a good explanation so far. So then we're gonna use the DOM controller once again, and this time we're gonna write. So previously we read, now we're gonna write, and we're gonna use the renderer to change the style of our toolbar element. And we wanna set the top property to, let's do it like this, new position pixel. And there we go. So let's give this a try. Actually, I will give it a try on a device. And you see, actually the toolbar is somehow moving up. But that's not really a great UI, I would say. So what I also added is I added a little change to the opacity, because then it feels even more natural. So let's say new opacity is 1 minus. Now another little calculation, new position, so that's a value between 0 and -44, or for Android minus, I don't know the value. And we divide this by our toolbar height. Why do we divide it by the toolbar height? It made sense when I wrote this, so just trust me, this will give you a value between 1 or, so if the new position is 0, the opacity will be 1, that's fine, and once we scroll down, it will get somewhere close to 0, or it will actually be 0 at one point. So instead of top, we will now change the opacity, and we will just set it to our new opacity. And then the whole animation looks already a lot better. The icons kind of fade out. You could do this faster or you could do this slower, but it's still not 100% great. And that's because our image from the background is scrolling behind the toolbar, and we actually want to see the image here. That will be way cooler. And the fix to this is simply go back to your home page and say full screen true. So this is a property from Ion content that you should set to true when you want to scroll something behind your header. And now the animation, and you see my image here with the opacity is behind the toolbar, and the whole toolbar just fades out. And if the user is using the application a bit faster, you see it just feels natural. So the opacity changes, and somehow the status bar is gone. If you can implement animation or UX behavior that the user doesn't really notice while it's doing its job, then you did everything correctly. So perhaps you could tweak the speed of how fast things disappear, or you could also change the height of the icons or do anything like this, but it's already a great starting point for your application. Okay. Now we want to do a second thing, and that's a bit different. For that, I will just comment this one out and use it once again. We still need full screen true, we need the scroll events, and now we need app fade header. And for our app fade header, we actually need I'm a bit confused, because I thought I also used the header. Let's quickly do a test, because I noticed a difference between using the header in here and using the toolbar reference. Yeah, I actually don't notice a huge difference, but I thought that using the header in here works even better. I can't say for sure right now. Maybe give it a more closer test, but for our fade header we will definitely use the toolbar, because the toolbar has the color, and that's what we want to animate with the fading effect. So let's change this to app fade header. Everything else is still the same. Now we also need to change the CSS, because what we want to do is, and I will leave a little comment in here as well, only necessary for the fade header. We want to start with the image at the top. That's maybe a good idea perhaps for modal dialogues, which might even not have a toolbar at all. And set the toolbar background to transparent and the border color, because otherwise you get this ugly border here. And we want to make the content start right at the top. And now once we scroll down, we want to fade in our header. We don't want to fade it out now, we want to fade it in. That's a bit different behavior I saw somewhere in the Airbnb application. I really like this because right now it's above the image, it looks cool, but once you get to the content, you might want to have a real header. So that's really the opposite. Okay, that's our starting CSS. That's using the app fade header, and I will actually copy this code for now to the fade header directive, because we're gonna reuse a bunch of this stuff as well in here. So let's add all missing imports. This one should be called now app fade header. We don't need the height. We don't need the renderer as far as I know, because we will directly write to our toolbar. Inside our init, we want to do the same like before. We want to access the element because it's in here. And within the scroll, we now need to do a bit different from what we did before. Actually, we can keep the scroll top. So I thought that maybe by a distance of 255, we should see the status bar completely. Also, I think this made my calculation using some hex values a lot easier. So feel free to play around with this value. So if we've scrolled further than 255, we will just keep it to this value. Yeah, then we should use let instead of const. And now the trick is, I want to set the background CSS variable with hex code. And for hex code, you don't just have the 6 available digits for red, green, blue. You could also have 2 more for opacity. And that's the trick we're gonna use. So we're gonna convert our distance. Actually, why did I use distance and it's scroll top? We're gonna convert this to a string, and this will be actually a hex string. Now, if you don't trust me, let's log this out. Hex distance. And where's our browser window? There we go. So now when I scroll down, you see this is actually a hex value, and this is like the biggest value we can get. So with that hex value in place, we can once again access our DOM controller, call write, open the function, and set on our toolbar the style directly. I couldn't make this work with a renderer. Actually not sure why. Most likely it was just my incompetence. So set property dash dash background. That's the CSS variable for the background of the toolbar. And we're gonna set this to a nice whatever value. I actually found the initial value for light. So that's the light color from Ionic. And we're going to append our cool opacity hex dist, whatever you want to call it, right to the end. And with that in place, let's check out the phone once again. And once we scroll down, you see the status bar is coming in and is now at some point at the full cal. It actually looks a bit bad on my device. This is not really white, this is a different color. I'm not sure why it's always shown wrong, but it's a really cool effect that you can use in some pages. Perhaps it looks better here. Let's give it a try. Now you see it's really the gray we wanted to have. Or you could also access the buttons within here, but now you got really 2 ways to optimize your applications. You could scroll out and fade out the header on longer pages where the user just needs more space to read your text, or in different settings where you maybe have an image like this, you could completely hide the toolbar background in the beginning and just slowly show it afterwards. This could also be combined with the parallax effect for scrolling out the image a bit slower. That also looks really great. That's the complete effect you see in the Airbnb application. So if you're interested in that one, I'll definitely create a quick win. Just leave a comment below and also leave a like, of course, as always. If you got any other questions, check out the code linked below the video for Ionic Academy members. And if not, you can always find me inside the Ionic Academy. So have a great day and take care. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and stay subscribed so you get notified about all the new tutorials, quick wins, and other app development and web development videos on this channel. If you want to learn more about Ionic with in-depth courses, a community of like-minded developers so you can learn and build your apps faster, you should definitely check out the Ionic Academy, which is my code school to help you with everything Ionic, with a huge library of courses, material, and a supportive Slack channel so we can get your app out. I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you inside the next video. Have a great day and happy coding. Simon.